Achieve resilience, inspiration, and empowerment. Welcome to Arise, a speaker series presented by Vision Loss Alliance of New Jersey. We are honored to have with us tonight Father James Warnke. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm so delighted to be here.
Father James describes himself as a husband, a father, a teacher, shrink, a sensei, priest. He says life has been ordinary, but it seems much more than that. As a priest and counselor, he has learned that all people struggle with spiritual issues and had to reconcile the war between two opposing worldviews, that of psychotherapy and spirituality. He understands the inherent connection between mind, body, and spirit. Driven by his deep sense of vocation and calling, he carved out a well-balanced and integrated life for himself. And at the same time, he was dedicated to helping others find that same balance using his gifts of counsel, teaching, mentoring, and spiritual guidance. Father Warnke believes it was a combination of dumb luck and divine providence that afforded him the opportunities he has had. But to take advantage of these opportunities clearly involved hard work, planning, tenacity, and self-advocacy in the face of discrimination in a pre-ADA era. Father Jim has worked for years with clients who are experiencing vision loss. He has served as chair of the Psychology and Social Work Division of the Association for Education and Rehabilitation of the Blind, AER, and lectured at conferences in the US and Canada. As a former chairman of the State Rehabilitation Council for the New Jersey Commission for the Blind and Visually Impaired, he has advised on policy and performance of agencies serving the blind. He has also studied Dr. Dean Tuttle's work on adjustment to vision loss and has spent a decade teaching and training mental health professionals and professionals working in the fields of vision loss. In the beautiful words of Father Jim Warnke, and I quote, "I have been a competent practicing psychotherapist for 36 years. I do a job that I love, and I feel I've made a contribution to the world. I have lived a normal life, and I'm proud of that. I've raised a family and made a living as a person who is blind. I kept at it and didn't fold. I was allowed to have an ordinary life, and it's been a beautiful life. To have the privilege of living an ordinary life as a person with a disability is quite extraordinary." We ask for you to allow our guest his time to speak and inspire. When the time is right to share your thoughts and your comments or questions with Father Jim, he will let you know. For those of you who dialed in, please use the raise your hand feature, *9. Alt-Y to raise your hand. Alt-A is the mute and unmute command using keyboard commands. Using the Zoom app on the iPad, top right, select the More option on the top of the screen and flick down to raise hand. On the iPhone, this feature is located at the bottom of the screen on the right-hand side. And now at this time, I would like to welcome Father James Warnke.
Thank you again so very much. Again, I'm delighted to be here. And I'm just an old man with some ideas and some thoughts that I want to offer to you, some stories I want to tell you. And the things that you find helpful or interesting or useful, please take them as a gift. Although some of them, you might not be able to take like directly, but you might have to transpose them into the key of your own experience and your own life. You don't really want to be like me. The shaved head would not agree with most of you. So that also, that having been said, I want to offer you some thoughts. And here we go. Oh, by the way, it makes me a little nervous when I know that somebody has a mute button they can press. So it's here, a little anxiety in my voice. That's what it's all about. So ARISE, okay. I love the acronym and I love what it stands for. Achieve resilience. Resilience is not necessarily something you are born with, although it appears to researchers that some people are genetically more resilient than others. But resilience is something that can be learned and experienced and achieved if one is willing to learn how and put in the effort that's necessary. The same is true about inspiration. One cannot make oneself inspired, but you can put yourself in the vicinity of inspiration so that inspiration has to trip over you when it heads home. And I also want to say a few words about inspiration's twin sister, creativity, all of which supports and leads to self-empowerment. Self-empowerment is the ability to access one's own resources and the resources available in relationships and the resources available in the larger world and larger community to be able to live a good life, to be able to achieve one's realistic goals, and to enjoy, to really enjoy. So I want to start by addressing a problem that many of us experience at one time or another in life, and certainly at one time or another in adjustment to vision loss. And that is the voice of the inner critic, that voice in our head that tells us, you can't do this, you can't do that, it's worse than you think, nobody loves you, you're never going to get a job, you're never going to get married, you're never going to be able to learn to do fill in the blank, blah, 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 okay? And the problem with this interior negativity is it is disempowering, okay? It is disempowering. It limits our ability to access inspiration and creativity and to access the things we need to do to achieve real resilience, okay? Short aside, resilience, simply defined, is the ability to bounce back from adversity, from disability, from tragedy, from crisis, from all kinds of things. Life is filled with those sorts of things. As somebody once said to me, life is a contact sport. I don't usually use sports metaphors because I'm athletically impaired, but life is a contact sport. And because things happen, and so we have to be able to bounce back. That's what being resilient is. Meanwhile, back at this negative self-talk, these negative things that float in our head, and they come from several places. First and foremost, many of us will know that inner voice of negativity speaks to us, and it sounds remarkably like someone we know. It sounds remarkably like a mother, a father, a sister, a brother, an Aunt Louise, a grandparent, a teacher, a counselor. We can just fill in the blank. Someone who in our past had some kind of authoritative or important relationship, and they just didn't have a kind thing to say about us. They just didn't know how to be encouraging. If anything, they were discouraging. And so often we've internalized some of that, okay? It just bangs around in our head like that. The second thing is, when a person is feeling anxious or depressed, And with vision loss, you feel a little anxious from time to time. You feel a little down from time to time. It's not a sin. It's not crazy. It's a part of what we go through. Okay? When we are in those kinds of moods, that's when the negative self-talk, the negative thoughts in our heads tend to spiral downward and get worse and worse, or get louder and louder. And it becomes more and more difficult to focus, to function, to access our creativity and our ability to receive inspiration and our abilities for self-empowerment. And so, okay, what can we do about that? Okay, well, there's a book, and you can get it from NLS, probably other places too. It's a fairly recent book, couple of years old. It's called Chatter, Chatter. And I'm sorry, but I forgot the author, even though I tried to memorize his name. And he's a psychologist, and he talks about this very issue. And it's a wonderful book, and it gives real practical hints for addressing this business of negative self-talk, negative ideas banging around in our head. And I want to tell you that I am stealing shamelessly from that book tonight, just as a way of organizing my thoughts. I just finished reading it, and I liked it a lot, so I commend it to you. So what do you do? With these negative things that bang around in your head. The first thing is, don't argue with them. If you argue with them, they'll get stronger. Oh, Jim, you're a real piece of, doo-doo. No, I'm not. Yes, you are. No, I'm not. That's right. That's not productive. Okay? The part of us that brings forth that negativity is trying to be helpful. It's just not doing it in a helpful way. So the first thing to do is to be as accepting as you can of those negative things and recognize that they come from a place inside of you that's actually trying to be helpful. It's not succeeding. It needs better strategies, and we can engage those. So that's number one. That's sort of the basic premise. So secondly, what can be really helpful is watch your language. That's something my bishop tells me all the time. Father Jim, watch your language. Can't imagine why. But language both reflects and co-creates reality. It reflects reality and it creates reality, both. And so what we call something really matters. Okay? I was talking to somebody earlier today who said, she has a friend who's just developed an elderly person who's just developed some physical disabilities with sciatica. And she asked the person I was talking to, do I shuffle? And she said, well, why do you ask? She said, well, my sister says, pointing a finger and wagging it, you shuffle. And I said, I don't shuffle. So my friend said, well, your steps are a little closer together than they used to be since the sciatica. And the sciatica's got you limping a little bit and bending over a little bit. Now, by the way, that's an accurate description of what shuffling is without using the word. And the woman persisted, but do I shuffle? Well, my friend said, that's the most negative word you could put on it. Yes, that's true, but it's the most negative way you can look at it. If you look at it as the fact that your steps are just smaller and your hips hurt and you have sciatica and you're a little bit bent over, first of all, that doesn't feel so bad. And second of all, you can address each of those areas specifically and see if you can help, do physical therapy with yourself or with a professional to do that. Now, so the language that we use is of great importance, okay? So Someone says, I'm a depressed person. And I go, no, you're not. You're a person who at this moment happens to have depression. Okay? You know, I'm not visually impaired. I'm a person who has a visual impairment. Now, a brief aside. I need to tell you that we're not talking about BS, which of course you all know stands for blessings of the spirit. We're not talking about politically correct blah, 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 blah. BS and political correctness is language. They are both language that is designed to hide the truth and to obfuscate reality. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about putting the most positive frame on something that is truthful, that reflects reality. Okay. In Shrinkland, we call that, reframing. Okay. Which is a very important way to do. How can I look at this in a way that is both truthful and helpful? If it's just truthful, but it doesn't help, why would you bother? If it's trying to be helpful, but it's not truthful, it won't actually help. Okay? We have to call things by the names that they are in a way that's truthful and helpful. We no longer have a dog, but we used to have a dog. And the dog's name was Zoom. If I went out in the backyard in the evening and said, come here, Spot, come, Spot, nothing would happen because my dog's name was Zoom. But if I called the dog by the proper name, it would come. Okay. So I encourage you, all of us, to think about what is the most positive, truthful way of thinking about whatever it is I'm dealing with, because the negativity in the head is going to find the most negative, the most unhelpful way of presenting it to us. The second strategy that can be helpful in dealing with these kinds of issues is, in watching your language, is be careful. When you talk to yourself, you can change it. Okay? Either quietly in your head, or I like to talk to myself out loud on my sun porch, in the bathroom, in the shower, particularly if I'm upset about something, right? And you start, whether it's in your head or out loud, blah, 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 and you just keep going through a negative loop. What I do is, and what I commend to you as an interesting practice to see if it's helpful to you, is first of all, talk about yourself in the second person and use your name. So when I need to calm down, or I need to find a way through anger or disappointment or sadness or anxiety, once I know what's going on, once I notice that it's going on in my head, and it's maybe spinning not quite out of control, but it's getting into the suburbs of out of control, I change what I say in my head or out loud. Okay? Jimmy, Jimmy. Nobody calls me Jimmy since I've been a grown-up, okay? But I call myself that. Jimmy, what are you thinking? Jimmy, what are you thinking? Now, Jimmy, do we have to think about it that way, or is there some better way to think about it? Jim, and here we get in. So the use of language is important, okay? And that can be very helpful. As can other things. So, for example, using a really important word. The word is maybe. I'm pretty much sure that if you try to stop the negative cycle in your mind, or you try to, quotes unquote, break the cycle, you won't succeed. Because that's like arguing, and arguing only makes it worse. Okay. So sometimes you make an addition. Okay. So you'll be thinking to yourself, well, everything is going to hell in a handbasket and my life is over and I can't possibly continue. And, I'm just, not worth anything. Pause, take a breath, and then add a one-word sentence. Maybe. maybe. I guess it could be that way, but maybe. Why? Because what maybe means is that you're not discounting any of that, but you're saying there might be, could be, possibly other alternatives, right? That's not an argument. If you say maybe, nobody can argue with it because it's real and it's true. Maybe, right? Maybe the sky is going to fall. Maybe it isn't, right? Okay. And it's a way of inserting some distance, okay, from the negativity and from the cycling of the thoughts. It's a way of gaining some distance. Now, other ways of gaining distance are to sometimes to take some physical distance. If I'm sitting in this room where I do much of my study and work now, and I start to go into a negative loop, perhaps I'll get up and go into another room and start the internal conversation again. Now, wait a minute, Jim, let's start this over again. How are we doing? Is this really a catastrophe? Does this really have to be a catastrophe? What's going on? Let's think about this. And very often that helps me to find my way out. It helps people, because I've used these things in the therapy room when I was a practicing therapist. It helps people to find their way out of things. Another thing that people can do that they find interesting is to think about the part of you that's being negative. Remember, I talked about the part of you that's being negative at any moment is actually trying to help. It's just doing a really bad job. Well, to imagine that part of you sitting across the room in a chair or on the sofa, and then to have a conversation with that part of you about what are you trying to do? How are you trying to help me right now? Do you know that this is not being so helpful? What could you do that would be different? Now, by the way, this is one that you probably want to do when you're alone, okay? Because if your significant other or your children or grandchildren walk in and you're talking to somebody that they can't see on the couch, they're likely to have a problematic response. But it's using the imagination, really imagining that person is there. I don't visualize, but I can still imagine and sense an imaginary presence. It gives me some distance. Another way of thinking, which helps us sometimes to cut things down to size, and I love this one's very helpful to me and to many other people, but it's been very helpful to me. And the name for it in shrink world is it's called the early learning set. And it's particularly useful when you come across a task, something you need to accomplish, something you need to do, and it's overwhelming. It's just overwhelming. Okay. I thought learning to use a white cane was going to be more than I could ever possibly imagine. Okay. I was in denial for many years, wouldn't use a cane. I was trying to act like a sighted person. One adventure was one day when my daughter was young and visiting her girlfriend. My wife, Marie, had to go do something else. And I said, well, I'll walk over and pick her up. It's less than a mile. She and I can walk home. And I had been to this house many times in the car as a passenger. And I thought I could find it. And I got to the neighborhood and realized driving through something in a car is different from walking. And I quickly became disoriented and didn't know where I was. And it was like a Saturday afternoon in the suburbs. There was nobody around. We don't have sidewalks in this neighborhood. Nobody was walking but me. And I didn't quite know what to do. And I thought to myself, because I know the names of the streets here. If I can just figure out what street I'm on and what the cross street is, I'll know which way to turn. But I couldn't see the street sign, and it was a suburban street sign. It's about 10 feet up. So I started jumping up and down, trying to catch a glimpse of the of the sign. Couldn't do it. Didn't work. And so I looked around and there was nobody there. This was the days before cell phones. So I was young and strong in those days, and I simply put my arms and legs and climbed up to the top of the sign. And then held the sign and did a little chin up. And, the letters were like half a foot tall. I could see them even from there. And then the problem began because it was a corner house. And out the back door came this beautiful collie. And the collie saw a man up the sign. And the collie thought that was really interesting and came running over and jumping up and down and barking. I wasn't afraid. The dog was clearly being friendly, woof, 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 woof. And then the dog was immediately followed by the man carrying a leash. He saw the man up the sign, the dog at the bottom of the sign, and immediately thought the dog had chased the man up the sign and came running over, angry at the dog. Now the dog was getting PO'd, right? And now it was not happy. And I'm hanging there. And I'm thinking, and he's trying to get the leash on the dog. And I'm thinking, oh boy. And then I realized, much to my chagrin, I was wearing a t-shirt with a mock college logo on it that my son had given me. He was in college at the time. It was a pretend college logo. And the words it said in big black letters was psychotic state. So I shimmied down the pole, crossed my arms, hoping he wouldn't see what it said, and it went through an explanation of what it was meant to be visually impaired, even though I wasn't totally blind. So I should have taken that as a warning, but I didn't. And the next thing that happened to me was on a rainy night, going back to the car with my wife and kids after an evening someplace, dinner out, the movies, I don't know which. I was crossing a street and I got hit by a car at a crosswalk. Because I wasn't using sighted guide with my wife. It was raining. I wanted to be a gentleman and go ahead and, unlock the car for them. And again, it gets, first of all, by the way, having studied the martial arts for many years, I will tell you that I threw my body up the car, rolled over the windshield, the car went under me, and I will tell you, a perfect brake fall in the middle of the street, not injuring myself, okay? I wanted the cop to take a picture so I could bring it back to my sensei and show him how wonderfully I had done. But the worst part was when they stopped, the people in the car, it was an 18-year-old girl. She was a friend of my son's. She was driving for 4 days. She was in the car with her father. It was the first time she drove in the rain. I was just beside myself. And I thought to myself, Jim, you so-and-so blankety blank, blank, blank. How dare you impersonate a sighted person and put that kid at risk? That kid, I don't want that. What if she had killed you? She'd have been in therapy for 45 years because she killed her friend's father. When we got home that night, I called a friend of mine who was an O&M instructor at the Commission for the Blind. And I said, we're going to a meeting over the weekend together in Atlantic City. You're going to bring me a cane and you're going to show me how to use it. He was young at the commission and he said, well, we probably ought to open a case. And I said, first of all, I want the training in less than 6 years. And secondly, we're just going to do this. And so he showed up and I had my first cane instruction. Why? Because it had never occurred to me that when somebody driving a car saw me and they didn't see a white cane, they thought I could see them. And they didn't know to take extra care because I might do something stupid because I didn't really see them. Lesson learned. So an early learning set is very helpful. What you do is, when I started with the cane, I started to think, this is hard. I'm never going to be able to do it. I'm going to get killed, blah, blah, blah. And an early learning set is you go back from even before you can remember. And either in your head or out loud or on a computer screen, you make a list of everything you've ever learned to do since the beginning of time. Okay? That you've actually learned and you actually can do. So I started, well, when I was a little bitty baby, I know that I peed my diapers. I can't remember it, but I know that it's got to be a fact. And now I don't do that, at least not often. I wasn't quite so old in those days. And, oh, wait a minute. There was a time when I couldn't walk, couldn't do it. And I've noticed I've been walking around my house all day. I guess I mastered that. There was a time when I couldn't tie my shoelaces. I remember that was a struggle, but I learned I tie my shoes all the time. And there was a time when I didn't think I could pass a spelling test, and I did. So on and so on and so on and so on. Real things that we all really know how to do. And so then you think, well, if I've learned all of that, maybe I can learn this new thing that I need to learn. Why? Because one of the antidotes to negativism is hope. And hope is not wishful thinking. Hope is having a belief that it's just possible that you could fill in the blank. I just could possibly learn Braille. I could possibly learn how to use JAWS. It's not impossible that I could learn how to do mobility with a cane. It's not impossible that I could learn how to do mobility with a dog. It's not impossible that I could find a way to adapt in my work so that I could continue at a job I like or get a job that I would like. So remembering the things that we have accomplished. When I got older, an older version of that is I in my therapy room, shrinks put up their diplomas like doctors do. And I put up, my degrees, and, you get certificates and all this stuff over time. And if you live long enough and don't die, you really get a bunch of them. And my wife used to come in and look at all these 25 certificates on my wall and say, that's the wall of a very insecure man. And I would say to her, smiling, it used to be, but not anymore. On the mornings when I come in here and feel like a fraud, on the mornings when I come in here and think the social work police are going to surround my house and take out a bullhorn and say, okay, Warnke, we know you're in there. You're being arrested for impersonating a social worker. Come out with your hands up and bring your license. Because there were days like that. I would look at the diplomas on the wall. I could only really see, I couldn't read any of them, but I could see where they were framed in lines. And I would start to count them. Well, I knew the first one was from college, and the second was from my first master's, and the third was from my second master's, fourth was from my diploma in Anglican studies. And then I couldn't remember what the others were. In order. But by the time I got about halfway through, I thought to myself, well, Jim, you can't fool all the people all the time. You couldn't have conned all of those people into giving you degrees and certificates. Even if you're really a moron, you've got to know something. And I'd smile and I'd open the door and see my first client. So that's a thing that can be helpful. The next thing that can be helpful is going in the opposite direction, looking into the future. So you're facing something that's overwhelming, and you want to see if you can cut it down to just being whelming. Okay? So imagine you're holding in your hands and you can feel a beautiful crystal ball. And in the crystal ball, you can begin to sense that there's a solution to the dilemma that you're now facing. But it's only happened a long time from now. You don't say how long, but a long time from now. And then you imagine yourself then at that long time from now, when you've accomplished the thing that you didn't think you could accomplish, but it was a long time ago. And from that position, you remember how you did it. How did I resolve that? How did I solve that? Now, it's interesting because they've done studies on this among psychotherapy groups, and people who use this technique resolve their difficulties 90% better than people who didn't do the exercise. And this was something they really studied. But interestingly, almost none of them resolve the difficulty in the way they imagined they would. But there was just something about imagining it was over, thinking back. It's an interesting process. For those of you who are interested, it's called the crystal ball technique. You can go online and it'll tell you, 5 ways to do it. And you pick the one that's most useful for you. The other thing that can really be helpful in combating the negative thoughts, in transforming the negative thoughts into less negative thoughts, into thoughts that might be negative, and is to think incrementally. Most of the time, if we think we're stuck with something, it's because we try to change it in one fell swoop, or we try and do it too quickly, or to do too much too quickly. Being satisfied with really small increments is very useful. My grandfather used to calling it cutting something down to size. I remember once we were in the backyard, and since I couldn't see very well at all, I was never skilled labor. I was like the grunt labor. And we were putting in a new water line, and we had to dig a trench. And the trench needed to be 3 foot down and 2.5 feet wide. And for whatever reasons, I just remember the dimensions. And, I was only about 13, and I did, it was a lot of work. And my grandfather saw that I was getting, tired and frustrated. And he said to me, remember, they all called me Jimmy when I was a kid. Jimmy, if you keep looking to the end and seeing how much you haven't done, you're going to get tired and quit. If you look right in front of you and you think to yourself, all I have to do is dig 1 shovel at a time, you'll be done before you know it. 1 shovelful at a time. And that's always stuck with me as a way of breaking things down into pieces that are less overwhelming. I figure if I can get to just whelming half the time, that's going to be a good thing. I want to talk about resilience in a minute, but these are just some strategies I want to offer you, as a way of thinking about how you might deal with the spirals of negative thoughts that we all suffer from time to time. Don't argue with them. It makes them stronger. Break things down into increments. Think about how to remember all the things in the past that you have accomplished, and then maybe you can accomplish this one. Think about going into the future in this imaginative exercise and reflecting back. How did you do it? Okay. Maybe I can, because I can imagine doing it in some way, maybe I can actually do it. Okay. Maybe is a great word. Okay. Language of possibility, right? I always loved the children's book, The Little Engine That Could. I think I can. I think I can. I think I can. It's a wonderful book. Years ago, my wife was an early childhood special ed teacher. I think of myself as being her oldest student. And she worked with little tiny kids. And one of her kids with cerebral palsy had to have surgery on her to do something with her hip joints. And so she was in the hospital, and they were very concerned about her. Her parents were, Marie was. And so we went and bought her a book and drove to the hospital and went to see her. We didn't tell her or her parents that we were coming. Why? Because we wanted them, in the midst of all of this fear and anxiety, to have a pleasant surprise. They were anticipating that any surprise they had would be pleasant. But we could give them one pleasant surprise. Imagine a little first grader having their teacher walk in, having traveled into New York City to get to the hospital. And what a delight that might be. And the parents were they were just delighted. oh, thank you for coming. They thank me for coming. It's so sweet of you to come all this way. Marie and I had already agreed. I shooed the parents out of the room and took them for a cup of coffee. And Marie had the kid open the book, and it was the little engine that could. And first, Marie read it to her. Then Marie read it to her, but when they got to the point where the train said, I think I can, I think I can, she pointed and said, you know what those words are, you say them. And the kid would say, I think I can, I think I can. And they did that once or twice, and I brought the parents back in, and, we went home. Many weeks later, when the little girl was having physical therapy and was learning how to, go up those little physical therapy steps, with the braces and stuff, the physical therapist reported that she was doing really well. And smiling, the physical therapist said to the mother, and what's really cute is when she's doing the steps, I can hear her saying in a whisper, I think I can, I think I can, I think I can. What did Marie do? She simply seeded an idea, right, for being successful in overcoming an adversity, because that's what resilience is. The other thing that helps is having a network of people who are supportive and truthful, okay? People who won't blow smoke up our skirts, people who will tell us the truth, but they will do it because they love us, and they'll do it in a loving way. People who will be encouraging. And a part of this means limiting your exposure to people who are negative, okay? Right? I grew up in a family where a couple of the adults, if they got up on a bright sunny day, they'd say, yeah, but it's raining someplace, and, if I failed a spelling test, they'd say, well, of course, you're not going to ever be able to learn to spell, which don't tell them is true. But I have a spell checker that giggles, but, oh, you'll never learn to do math. Oh, you'll never be any good in school. That's all they could ever tell me, All I could ever do was disappoint them, okay? So as I got older, I just stopped hanging around with those people. I would see them, at Thanksgiving when I had to, but I wasn't calling them. I wasn't returning their calls very much. I wasn't going to spend time with them. Why? Because they just reinforced that negativity. And the same can be true with friends, or even, God help us, sometimes with significant others. I've been married for almost 52 years now, and it's a blessing I married well, okay? And one of the reasons I know I married well is Marie is totally supportive of me and won't let me get away with anything, okay? She will not let me get away with anything because I'm visually impaired. She will not. And again, she's not mean about it, but she's just not buying. To give you a sense of what her attitude is, one of her friends took her out when we got engaged and said to her, have you thought about the fact that you're marrying a guy with a disability? And she was offended. I wasn't when she told me the story. And Marie's response was to say to her friend, he'll never argue with me about who's going to drive home. Okay. So you want to surround yourself. And by the way, this is why many of the ARISE programs are wonderful. The self-help groups that the CBVI sponsors and stuff like that are very helpful. Why? Because you're with people who are always going to be encouraging and supportive and realistic about that. I guarantee that if you're in a group of people who are visually impaired and you say one of your life goals is to become an airline pilot, they will not be supportive of that activity. Why? Because it ain't happening. We hear sometimes, you can do anything you want. Not true. You can do anything you want that you have the talent to do, that you're willing to work at, and that you can work out a reasonable accommodation for your disability to get around. Airline pilot is not one of them. I'm still living for the driverless cars, by the way. I want to live that long, just so you know. If I decide I want to be a diamond cutter, that's not going to happen. But could I be a high school teacher? Yeah, because I could figure out how to do that. Could I be a therapist? Yeah, I could figure out a way to do that. Could I be a priest? I could figure out a way to do that. And also I could figure it out. And here's the thing. I had to do the figuring, just as you do. But the things that you have to do all by yourself, you can never do in isolation. You always need people to talk to, people to be supportive, people to be encouraging, which often means people who tell you when they think you're going off in the wrong direction. Unfortunately, we mostly only get criticism from our enemies, from the people who don't like us. And when they criticize us, first of all, they do it in such an awful way that we have to put our fingers in our ears. And secondly, a lot of what they tell us isn't true. And so it's hard to sort out the parts that are true from the parts that aren't. By the way, I can tell you how to do that. The parts that hurt the most are usually the parts that are true. Whereas, and just like the negativity in our heads, it tells us that all is lost, everything's terrible. No, it isn't. So cultivate relationships with people who are supportive and truthful and encouraging in your realistic endeavors. Okay, why? Because that's how you achieve, acquire, cultivate resilience, the ability to bounce back, the ability to get up when life knocks you down, the ability to find a way through when you didn't think there was a way through. Okay, that's what resilience is. And that also depends on our willingness to be open to inspiration and to cultivate creativity. Inspiration is not just an idea. You're inspired when you have an idea that you then begin to work on and put into process. And that is when the twin sister of creativity comes in. Creativity says, I'm pretty sure there's got to be a way for me to do this. How am I going to do it? And it usually comes, the ingredients of creativity are usually taking two things that don't go together and finding a way to fit them together to make them work. I was a high school teacher for 7 years. When the principal hired me, I said, there's one thing I can't do. I can't do homework. It's only 20 minutes long. It's collecting money. It's making lists. I said, you'll be unhappy. I'll be unhappy. The kids will be kind of screwed. So I can't do that. I said, however, all new teachers in this school used to get a homeroom. I said, as an accommodation to my disability, give me cafeteria duty, make me a hall monitor, have me walk up and down after school and, bug the kids who are smoking marijuana, or this was the South Bronx, or the pimps that wanted to pick them up and take them for a ride. I said, I can do all of that, right? And if anybody complains, well, Mr. Warnke doesn't have a homeroom, just tell him he's doing all the other crap you don't want to do. And that seemed perfectly reasonable to her, and it was perfectly reasonable. And we never got a complaint in a school where there were lots of complaints. Okay? So trying to figure out how you can... Now, climbing the sign was creative. It was kind of stupid, but it was creative. I mean, you got to give me that. I got to get points for effort in that one. So how can you do this? What is it that I can do that I might be able to use in the service of what I can't do? I'm talking to you tonight using my iPhone to do Zoom. Why? Because I haven't mastered the computer well enough to be able to do Zoom on the computer. And I thought to myself, I'm doing church on Zoom. I'm doing workshops on Zoom. I'm doing prayer services on Zoom. What am I going to do? I need to use Zoom. And all of a sudden I found out there was an app for Zoom. And so here we are. I'm using the technology that I can use in a way that I can use it. You can too. you can figure out creatively how to overcome most things. And if you're willing to do it in increments and in stages, that creativity will join with her twin sister inspiration, and you'll be off to the races. You'll be off to the races. And that leads you to the kind of self-empowerment. Self-empowerment is, I can do this. I can find it within myself to do it. I don't have to do that in isolation. My friends can help me access it. My family can help me access it. People in self-help groups and other groups can help me access it. And I can utilize, I can really use any technique that you use to combat the negativity, any technique that you can use that works for you, that isn't a crime or a sin, is a good technique. Okay? Avoid crimes, avoid sins. Crime is defined in the criminal code. Sin, well, you work that out with God. Okay? But if it works, it's a good strategy. Okay? It may not be a strategy you want to continue, but it's a strategy that works. I had a little boy come to me many years ago with a degenerative eye disease. And the disease required that he be examined, including having his pupils dilated about every 3 or 4 months. And he was having a panic reaction when he was having his pupils dilated. And it was so serious that the doctor was thinking he was going to have to put him in restraints because they had to do the exam, and he couldn't tolerate it. He was having panic attacks. He wasn't being bad. He wasn't being obstreperous. They didn't know they were panic attacks. The guy was an ophthalmologist. How would he know a panic attack if he saw one? Parents didn't know. I knew because I was a shrink. And so he came in, and I noticed when they came in for their first session that he and his sister were carrying little bundles. And I said, "Oh, what's that?" Under their arms. And they said, "Oh, my mom and we just started to take karate classes, and this is our uniform." "Oh, great." And I explained to them that I was a sensei and I had studied karate for, 20 years at that point, and wasn't that interesting. So I brought the little boy in, and he did not want to talk about the panic attacks. You talk in therapy. He didn't want to talk about it. He didn't want to know about it. He didn't want to hear about it. I said, "Okay." And they said, "Yeah, we have our karate lesson right after we come to see you, and so we go directly there." I said, "Next time you come, wear your uniform. Carry your street clothes, but wear your uniform." And he did. And I brought him in, and I said, "So listen, you don't want to do therapy, right?" And he said, "No." I said, "Okay, how about I tutor you in karate? Because that would be helpful since you can't really see the people in the mirror, and that's a problem." He said, "Oh, that'd be great." So I taught him a little private lesson in karate that started with talking about the samurai and how they were men of deep contemplation and women of deep contemplation. And here now we're going to sit cross-legged, and we're going to breathe, and we're going to close our eyes. And this is how samurai access their courage. This is how karateka, men and women who do karate, access their courage before they fight. And they breathe in this certain way, and they sit still, and then they open their eyes, and they're ready for the conflict. So the next examination was getting closer and closer. This is all I was doing with the kid. I said to him, "Look, you're going to have an eye exam next week. Do you think you're ready?" And he said, "Yeah, don't worry about it. I'll be okay." So I did something that my wife taught me to do as an early childhood specialist, is I trusted the kid. The kid said it in a way that made me trust he knew what he was doing. I said, "You want to tell me what's up?" He said, "No." I said, "Okay." And his mother was anxious, and I said, "Look, on the day of the test, do whatever he asks you to do that isn't crazy, okay? If it's not crazy, just do it if he asks you to do it." So they called me up after the exam. He had been fine. I said, "Oh, great. How did he do it?" She said he insisted on wearing his karate uniform to the doctor's office. And we sat in the waiting room, and he folded his little hands, and he did breathing, and he closed his eyes. And when the doctor came out, he stood up, bowed to the doctor, walked into the examining room, climbed up on the table, sat cross-legged, opened his eyes, and didn't move until the doctor told him he was done. He got off the examining table, bowed, and went back to his mother. This is a kid who figured out to take a skill that he learned in one situation and transpose it into another situation. And that's the definition of creativity, isn't it? That's the gift of inspiration. And I want you to notice, it wasn't my inspiration. I didn't say to him, why don't you think of going to the doctor as going to a karate lesson? That would have spoiled the whole thing. What did I do? I noticed something that he was really interested in, and he was really likely to be responsive to. And I knew that if he could sit quietly, do deep breathing, and be really still and prepare to be courageous, he could go through that. Those were things that he could use. Did I know how he was going to use them? I had no idea. I had no idea he was going to do the karate thing. But I knew that they were experiences that he could use. A picture is worth 1,000 words for sighted people. An experience is worth 1,000 pictures. And that's even true for us. So you can give yourself experiences of creativity in one vein or another. You know, if you're trying to straighten things out in your mind, clean out your desk, fold the laundry, do the dishes by hand. Why? Because then your body is straightening things out, and that will transfer in some way into your mind and help disperse the negativity. I need to pause for a second and say, how much time do I have left, please?
It is 8 o'clock.
Oh God, I went overtime. I'm so sorry.
No, you're fine. You're good.
Okay, then I'm sorry. So let me just finish by saying, anybody who tells you that you can do anything you want, no matter what, it's just liar, liar, pants on fire. Okay. Anybody who tells you that for almost everything, if you're willing to be creative, if you're willing to look for inspiration, if you're willing to dispense with the negative thoughts or cut them down and replace them with thoughts that are positive and realistic, then you're going to be able to figure out accommodations that are reasonable for you and that you can actually do. You know, think about that guy. I can never remember his name because I want to kill him. The guy who is totally blind and climbed the highest mountain on every continent, including Antarctica. I want to go to a lecture that he's giving someday, just so that at the end of the lecture, I can go up and beat him unconscious and say, thank you so much. I thought I was doing well. You had to set the bar so high. I could never do that in a million years. And I would be teasing. I wouldn't hurt him. But think about read the book if you haven't about it. I forget what it's called, but it's, I think it's called something crazy like the disability advantage. I don't know, but again, you can find it on NLS. And he talks about all the adaptations he made and how he climbed those mountains every single step by himself. Every step by himself, but he didn't do it alone. He couldn't do it in isolation. What he had to do all by himself, he had to have a group of people to do with it. So thank you very much for your attention. And if there are comments or questions, please try to keep them brief, because I'm lovable but not that bright. And if it's a really long question, I may lose the train of thought. So if you would be patient with me that way and do my best to respond to them. Please, go ahead.
Very good. Okay, I'm going to take questions according to who raises their hand. So I see Aaron.
How do you deal with nihilism, especially as an adult?
Okay, Aaron is right. So Aaron, what is your definition of nihilism?
Like not getting meaning, not getting any meaning in life.
Hold on just a second. Just a second. I'm sorry. My phone is telling me that 15 people are coming in and out. I can't hear you. Aaron, could you say that again, please? You were defining nihilism for me.
Like nihilism means to me is not getting any meaning in life out of life.
Okay. So again, I don't have an answer to that, but I have a response. So 2.5 years ago,
you see life as meaningless.
Okay, and so here's my response to that. 2.5 years ago, I was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, and they took a tumor the size of an orange out from under my arm. And the chances that I was going to live were not great. I also have diabetes, kidney disease, herniated discs. I got all kinds of stuff. I long for the days when I used to be just visually impaired. Okay. Life was way simpler then. There are 2 ways to go about meaning in life. Meaning is both found, as in discovered, and created. Life can mean what we want it to mean. Okay. I'm a religious man. My religious faith presents me with meaning that I can accept. Okay. But I tell you, for 2 years, my toes were hanging over the edge of eternity. I was looking death straight in the face. And trust me, I got the what's it all about, Alfie question. And my life meant for me what my faith taught me it meant, but it also meant what I decided it meant. And I decided that my life had meaning because I was simply alive and could breathe and think. My life was going to have meaning because I was going to mean something by it. I was going to leave this world a little tiny bit better than when I walked in. I was going to do my best to help people that I could help. I don't do Habitat for Humanity because I can't build anything. I hit my thumb instead of the nail. But I do counseling, and I've done counseling. Why? Because I could learn to be good at that. And so people walked out of my office better than when they walked in, at least some of the time. So what I would encourage people who, if you're experiencing, this nihilistic thing is, I think people who want to tell you that life is meaningless are just full of crap and they haven't tried hard enough. Because there's wonder to be experienced in this life, right? There's meaning to be discovered and there's meaning to be created. Your life means something when you decide to mean something by it, kind of whatever that is. That's my best shot at responding. I hope it's helpful, Aaron. Who's next?
Thank you, Father. Michael, you have a hand raised.
Yeah, I just had a comment. I just wanted to thank Father Jim for his talk. This is my first Arise meeting, and it was to listen to his talk. I think I even heard him earlier, but I just wanted to thank him for his talk.
Oh, Michael, you're so welcome. Do you know how tough it is to get an old guy to get a gig? I mean, I'm so grateful. You have no idea. Thank you so much.
And my question also, you did therapy for counseling with the commission for the Drew program, correct?
Yes, I did. Yes, I did.
I met you years and years ago and did counseling with you, and I still remember those counseling sessions. So
well,
I want to
God
thank
bless
you for that.
Well, and thank you for saying so. That warms my heart, and I'm grateful for your presence. You're most welcome, and thank you for telling me that I did some little piece of good in the world. God love you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Thank you for that. And Aaron, anyone else have a comment or a question? You've silenced them all. That's amazing.
Unpress your mute buttons. Unpress your mute buttons.
I have the last 4 digits, 8221. You have your hand raised. Hello.
Yes, hi, Father. My name is Jennifer, and I just want to thank you very much because I really appreciate your presentation this evening. I'm going through something in life, and what you have said has really touched me in my heart and soul. So I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you, sir.
Oh, Jennifer, you are, as I said, you are so welcome. You know, people have said to me, good-meaning people, you know, I'm in remission from the cancer, and I'm in remission from the brain tumor. It's miraculous. 5 years ago, there was no treatment for what I had. They would have sent me home to pick the hymns for my funeral. And so here I am. And so a lot of nice, you know, church people are like church people. And they're very sweet. And they say, oh, Father, God must have something special in mind for you. Right? So I asked him, and he said, no, just keep doing what you're doing. Because I think what happened when I was sitting there with my toes hanging over the edge of eternity, knowing that I could die any day. Oh, by the way, I forgot to tell you, I also have coronary disease. I did die on December 18th, 2018. I had a massive coronary and was dead on the table in the emergency room of Hackensack Hospital. The nice doctors, they say I was out for a while, but they brought me back. And, you know, I was in a medically induced coma for a couple of days. But what I think happened is God saw me coming over the horizon. And God said, oh, no, that boy ain't nearly bred. That boy ain't nearly bred yet. Put him back in the oven. So thank you, Jennifer. Anybody else got something?
Debbie.
I just wanted to say, Father Jim, that when I saw that you were booked as our first speaker, I knew that I had to be at this meeting because I remember you as being the most real and honest and inspirational blind speaker that I've ever heard. And you always make me feel good because you don't sugarcoat things, but you also don't let us get away with a lot of self-pity. So I just wanted to say that you exceeded my expectations again, and I thank you so much.
Well, praise God, and again, thank you for saying so. You know, as I said earlier, BS doesn't help anybody.
No.
And thinking every day in every way things will get better and better is BS with capital letters.
It is.
And
I
yet,
agree with you so much when you say you can do anything you want. I want to just smack those people.
Oh, if I could find them, I would smack them. You know? And yet then there is that other part which says, well, it's overwhelming right now. Is there something I could do to change it from being overwhelming to just being whelming? Because that would be an improvement. And then what could I do to make it less whelming? You know, and there's almost always something, you know, almost always something.
That's true.
I also have of the many things that are wrong with me, they've given me like a decade of chronic, really serious pain. And, you know, one night, nothing would help. Did my self-hypnosis. I was taking narcotics at the time. You know, I would never take them more than was prescribed. It was like not doing any good. So I went downstairs, and this was creativity out of desperation. I remembered somebody had told me a joke, and the joke was about someone who was involved in, shall we say, an amorous activity, okay, who at a very inopportune moment got an intense itch on their derriere, which kind of spoiled the mood and what was going on. And I remembered that the reason that's actually true is our neurology is wired to only pay attention to the most intensive thing we can feel. So I went downstairs, I got some ice out of the refrigerator. I put a towel under my hand and I put the ice in the palm of my hand. And I sat there and waited for the ice to melt. Can you imagine how intense that feeling became? Now, by the way, if you do this, don't stick your hand in an ice bucket. You'll get frostbite. That's bad, bad, bad. And you know what? It didn't take away the pain, but it gave me some relief. Why? Because my brain couldn't not ignore that. It was too intense. Again, creativity spawned by desperation.
Mhm.
Who else, please?
Thank you, Debbie. We have up next is Allison.
Allison, yes.
Hi, I just wanted to say thank you. I'm going through a lot of things with not just me, with my mom and my husband and my son, actually. I've had a lot on my plate recently, and I've had a lot of people, including doctors, say to me about being very resilient. And I've never really understood why they kept saying it. And today, just for how you were explaining what resilience is, just put it in perspective for me. So I just wanted to thank you for helping me find a different perspective and maybe understand what you're saying.
Yeah, I'm so glad. You know, isn't it nice to discover that you're more resilient than you thought? Hot dog. God bless you, and thank you for saying so.
Thank you.
Thank you, Allison. Next, we have Misty.
Misty?
Misty, you can just unmute yourself, please.
Oh, I'm unmuted.
Thanks, Misty.
I wanted to thank you because I had been going through issues with family members, cousins mainly, and it was so unbearable that I had to get a pacemaker put in.
Oh, Lord.
But after all the crying and carrying on, after a while, I said, you know what? Save your tears for your pillow, because it was telling me to get up off of the pity party and move on. And so, yes, I did block a lot of them off where they can't call me and however, but I grew in that with knowing that I can always go to my best friend, which is Jesus Christ.
There you go. He gets around, doesn't he?
Yes.
I mean, yeah, and you know, it's tough to think about cutting off people, especially family members. But you know, between you, me, and the doorpost, my father and stepmother were so negative that I had to stop seeing them.
Yeah.
It was just too difficult. And it's not like they weren't helpful. I mean, my father never beat me, and they didn't, you know, make me sleep outdoors. And my stepmother had been my tutor. So, and she was a really good tutor, you know, but it got to a point where I just couldn't do it anymore because it was just too awful. And again, that's a shame. You know, I didn't spit on anybody. I didn't hit, you know, you don't hit him. You don't have to, the thing is, you don't have to kill him.
Correct.
And you don't have, and you don't have to move to Australia. You just need enough distance so that they can't hurt you. When I was a kid, we used to have snowball fights. You ever do that as a kid?
Yes.
Okay. So the big kids would challenge the little kids to make a snow fort and have a snowball fight. And the little kids would always get creamed. What the big kids would do is they'd build the snow fort, and then they'd say to the little kids, okay, you make some practice throws and throw it as hard as you can. And they'd watch where the snowballs landed and stand 3 feet back from that. Little kids didn't know that. Now, by the way, when you got to change sides and be one of the big kids is when you figured that out for yourself. Nobody ever told you.
Yeah.
Okay, who's next, please?
Next
Thanks,
up,
Misty.
we have 2 more. I have 2 in line. First, we'll take Ivis.
Ivis? Okay.
Ivis.
Well, first of all, it's Evie's. I'm
sorry.
That's okay. Everybody does it. Anyway, I'm grateful for 2 things. Like, number one, you know, this notion of, you know, oh, you can do anything you want. And admittedly, there's a lot that we can do, but we can't do everything we want. And it doesn't make us, you know, doesn't make us any any worse of a person for it. And the other thing was, I've heard a lot of supposedly religious people say that, that you have to forgive the negative people. And yes, I agree with that. I don't agree that you have to be surrounded by them.
See, that's good. And even using religious language. Forgiveness is a table for one. I can forgive somebody, you can forgive. Reconciliation, having a relationship with them that, or having them around, that's a table for two.
Right.
A woman who is physically abused by her husband can forgive him, but she shouldn't reconcile with him. He's going to keep beating her. Right?
Exactly. Right? Yeah.
You can forgive bullies for bullying you, but you should also avoid them.
Yeah. I mean, my thing is like, okay, Lord, here, they're yours. You do what you want with them. I'm out of here.
Okay, that's good. And can I teach you a prayer for the ones who are really negative or bullying?
Absolutely.
Okay, this is a real prayer, by the way. I use it frequently. Dear Lord, you know my heart, so you know I really want you to send them to hell. Okay, Lord, okay. Even I will admit that that's probably excessive. How about you give them eternal joy in heaven? And if you could take them within the next 15 minutes, I'd be grateful. Amen.
Oh, I gotta love it.
Now, you notice I didn't pray for anything bad.
Nope, you sure didn't.
So that's Father Jim's prayer for people who piss us off.
I love it. Well, take care. I really, really
God love you.
this.
And thank you for being here tonight. Thank you so much.
Back at you.
Thank you, Davis. Tracy, you are up next. Hello, Tracy.
I'm here. Hello, Father.
Hi, Tracy.
Hi, thank you so much for coming and speaking with us. I got so much out of listening to you. I'm actually a counselor as well, and I counsel people, offer emotional support for people blind and visually impaired. And I myself am visually impaired. And so listening to you today has really helped me because we need counseling too. We need to keep the balance. So listening to you has really filled my cup.
Praise God. I'm so grateful.
Help me.
I am so grateful.
And here's the thing, Father, sometimes we get so high and full of ourselves. But, when we know the man upstairs and know that, we found the purpose and the plan that he's created for our lives in this journey, we don't look so high up, and get so full of ourselves because he's watching, right?
Pride is a good thing. Vanity and arrogance are bad things.
Yes, sir.
A good, healthy pride is a really good thing.
Yes.
And arrogance and vanity are really not good things. And by the way, just in terms of, I want you to know that I was in therapy for all 4 years. I was in college. I was in therapy 3 years after that. Then I took a break, and then I was in therapy for 12 years. So
yeah, therapy is good. Therapy is good. So I appreciate you do. Yeah.
To me, being independent, I'm independent when I use a cane. Why? Because by depending on the tool, I can independently get where I want to go.
Right.
I'm willing to be dependent on a therapist when I work with them so that I can function more independently out in the world. Right. So it's So, and by the way, God bless you and good luck in working with your clients.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate hearing you today. Thank you. God bless.
Thank you. Amen.
Any other comments or questions or thoughts? Well, I have to, this is Linda. I have to tell you, I love the twin sister of creativity.
Good. You didn't know they were twins? They're fraternal twins, but they're twins.
Fraternal twins. That's a good line. I think I'm going to keep that one in my toolbox here.
Please take it as a gift and use it with joy.
Do we have any other comments or questions for Father James Warnke?
Okay.
I think I do have one. Marcia?
Marcia?
Marcia, are you there? Marcia, you were unmuted. Can you unmute yourself, please? There you go. You're good now, Marcia. Can you ask your question?
Linda.
Yes.
Hi, this is Yolanda, Phyllis's sister. How are you?
Hi.
This is really a great session. And I was wondering if it was being taped. Therefore, you could receive a copy and it be listened to again, because it's definitely 100% worthwhile hearing more than once.
Oh, I am with you there. There was a lot of information. We'll get that to you. Don't you worry, Yolanda and Phyllis.
Thank you.
Okay. And again, remember, there are 2 books available from NLS on your NLS app, your BARD app, or whatever format you access those books in. The one is called Chatter. Again, I forget the author, but it's How to Deal with Negative Thoughts. And the other book that I would recommend is called Mindfulness for Anxiety. It gives 100 meditative exercises that you can select from to use in times of anxiety. And you can get them from BARD.
Thank you. So Chatter and Mindfulness for Anxiety. Very good. Very good. Thank you, Father Jim. Peggy, you have a question, comment?
No, actually, I just had a comment. I've known Jim for a long, 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 long time, and there is none like you.
That's funny. That's what my daughter says, but not in that tone of voice.
You're wonderful.
Thank you. Well, so when I was a new priest, the ADA was just coming to flower. And of course, the churches were the last ones to want to do anything about it. They got exempted from the law because they have the oldest buildings. So anyway, my diocese, the Episcopal Diocese of Newark, churches started putting ramps on and chairlifts in. So at that time, I was the only disabled priest in the diocese. And so I would be invited to preach when they were going to bless the new thing. I used to say, Jesus got the Sermon on the Mount, I get the sermon on the ramp. We were outside the church, and people are very kind like you guys. And people were coming out and saying, they would shake my hand. My wife was standing at my arm, and they were saying, "Oh, Father Jim, you're so wonderful." And next one would go, "Oh, Father Jim, that was wonderful." And the third one said, "Oh, Father Jim, that's wonderful." And my Marie leaned over and whispered in my ear, "Remember, God's the wonder. You're just the one that's full of it." That's why we've been married 52 years. You got to keep a woman like that.
Keep up the good work.
Do we have any other questions or comments? All right. So
I wanted to ask, when the folks have closed out, could we 3 stay on the Zoom for just a few minutes to kind of process?
Of course.
Okay, so, I just forgot to ask.
Close. Father Jim, I cannot tell you what an inspirational time this was. You kind of made me cry a little bit too.
Mhm.
I just want to really for
You're
being with.
welcome.
I really do. It's been a long time since we've wanted, our Vision Loss Alliance has have you as the speaker. And I thank you for your time. And I want to let everyone know that the Arise Speaker Series is made possible by Atlantic Health, the Morristown Medical Center Community Health Committee. So we are grateful for their support, but we are also grateful for all of your support as well, because it's all of you who join these calls, and we couldn't do it without our participants. So I want to say good night to everyone, and be safe and stay well.
Thank you and
Good
take
night
care.
and God bless you.
Thank you.
Ladies.
And take care. Be blessed.
Good night.